We are into our second half of the show today, and this is our personal story. And we have Isadore sitting in with us. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for asking me to come in.
Yeah. So now, your story is you're fairly new as far as being a person in recovery, correct?
Yes, I came down to Vancouver 5.5 months ago. February the 11th of this coming month, I will receive my six-month bob.
Congratulations.
For a clean time. So it's definitely been interesting going through.
Okay, so how old are you?
49 years old.
49. Wow, you don't look 49.
Thank you.
You look much younger than that. That's wow. Hey, recovery, like we get younger.
Oh yeah.
We get younger. And we were talking before the show, we get heavier weight-wise, but we get younger. That sort of vibrancy comes back in our eyes. So you're an important example of just the demographic of someone from the interior, northern interior of the province of BC, and you came into treatment in New Westminster.
Yes.
What was that like? What was the access for treatment? Did you have many options?
For myself as an individual coming from First Nations background, the options that are looked at are largely from the perspective of a culture-based initiative, and my personal view is I grew up immersed in my culture and fully understand the rules and regulations that a person takes on within their community. I wanted something that would provide me with a little bit more guidance and direction and changing my life effectively with regard to alcohol and drugs, more specifically drugs, with having a primary focus in drugs, because I was 42 years old when I finally got mixed up in it. And
right. Late bloomer.
Oh, very late. Yeah. Well, I mean, I dabbled in the lighter drugs earlier on and in my younger years, but hit the harder stuff as life went on, because I can remember being 15, 16 years old and thinking people that were doing what I was doing when I finished off were just nuts. You know, they're bad. They're the ones that OD. They're the ones that die.
Right.
And they just become statistics.
Right.
And by the end of it, I just about became one of those statistics for First Nations people with regard to addiction.
So, you grew up in Williams Lake?
Yeah, I was born and raised in Williams Lake. I spent a couple of years I was born in Williams Lake. I was raised by my grandmother for basically primary life for 5 years, having her instigate and nurture me with regard to our culture and traditions on my mom's side. And then once we moved back to Soda Creek Indian Band, where I come from, I got to know my dad's family, because all the way up until I was 8 years old, I was primarily around my mother's family, learning how our community operated and what our places were within a family structure, right?
Okay.
Learning how to take care of one another.
So a lot of love, like you said, nurturing.
Definitely, and the nurturing and the safety came in the fact that in our family, in our nuclear family, my aunts and uncles were expected to provide supervision and care for me when my grandmother was busy doing work or working out in the family garden, you know, providing for the family, because she was a single parent at the time too.
Okay.
So when I look at where things started going bad for me, I think it would be when I actually had that shift in caregivers, from primarily spending the majority of my time with mother's family into going into the house with my parents, because of the fact that I had to, opposed to being taken care of by an aunt or an uncle at the time, I became immersed with a new group of people to deal with, and it was difficult because of the fact that I would be gone for this amount of time throughout a year, and then I go back to the house, and I would have to figure out where I belonged in amongst these other 7 kids that were born into our house. And then after Mom and Dad sobered up, I say sobered up when I was 8 years old. So they've been in Alcoholics Anonymous for 41 years.
Wow.
Yeah, so because their ties come directly from, Mom's ties come directly from Alkali. So
Okay.
they made the video about the Alkali story when my Uncle Andy worked with the community to clean up the reserve sober up members of the community to provide a better life based on his experience.
Okay. And so now with all of that, you know, sort of community, you know, very sort of, I mean, let's face it, the First Nation people, you know, a lot of suppression from, you know, big outside influences for many years. And so you stepping outside of that to find treatments, was there any setbacks to that? I mean, you explained for, you know, for a little bit more substance abuse focus, things like, what were some of the setbacks for you?
I think largely with regard to how closely I was brought up with my mom's family and with the relationship that was developed within my community as I grew older, and the expectations set aside for us with regard to what we learned growing up. Just the hardest thing for me has been being away from my family. I don't have kids of my own, but I do have my brothers and sisters' kids that I've played a big role in with regard to raising them, providing care, running them to and from sports and whatnot as well. Then you stop and take a look at key role in my life has been my mother and my aunt and my cousins. Like, even though we moved from my mother's community area to my father's home community, the biggest key player in our family still to this day would have been Auntie Doreen and her kids. They were what we knew when we were growing up as kids because of the amount of interaction between them. So having just these 2 little nuclear families, even though Dad had his family at Soda Creek, we still only, my main connection was with Auntie Doreen, always feeling safe around her, always knowing that she was there to protect.
So you left, you know, that safety net that you've always known. You know, obviously loneliness, homesick, all of that comes into play. But do you think being away, you know, sort of allowed both yourself and the family to heal apart from, in a sense?
Definitely, it's allowed me to, being down here has allowed me to come into my own and allow me to look at my own issues with regard to getting well. The security and the camaraderie that exists in the facility that I was in, and that I still currently plan on being in for the next couple of days, is offering me structure and support for when I do go home within the next couple of days, to spend a couple of days at home to do that catch-up time with my mother's family, my dad's family, and my own family, because I have siblings back home and nieces and nephews and my sisters, and now have grandchildren, so big family.
So how important is that for you, do you think? Not having been in this position before, you know, leaving treatment, leaving the place that you've resided for the last 5 months, you know, got clean, you know, got into recovery. Now you're going home, but only for 4 days, and then you're returning?
I'm coming back to Vancouver. I'm going to be looking for employment down here in one of probably many vast areas with regard to benefiting individuals in probably a social field, a social administrative area for the benefit of people looking to address issues like this, or employment issues, or just personal skill development stuff.
Okay. So it's a little bit occupational, but as well just staying close to the support.
To stay close to the support that I've developed here as well. I think it's this opportunity away from my community and away from my family has allowed me to grow up. And I want for once I want to spread my wings, and I want to be able to go out and do stuff to show people,
Yeah.
you know, once
Yeah.
you get off of the reserve, there is a life
Yeah.
outside
Yeah.
of our little community of 250 people that we come from.
Well, it's funny because you mentioned that it's at some point we gotta you know, fly the nest, right?
Well,
and you know, often you're shipped out to treatment because your family's, you know, upset with you, and you know, you're causing a lot of damage. It's like that's not an independence thing that, you know, that it's causing you to leave. That's like your life is in total, you know, crisis, right? So now you're describing, you know, a choice with purpose, you know, to go somewhere and build your life from here on in. How's your sense of hope and thoughts of your future? Like, do you live in sort of fear of, you know, going back to your old ways, or are you hopeful?
No, I don't. Today, I can tell you honestly, right now, I don't have a fear with regard to falling back or slipping, because of the support that I have with regard to the people in the community where I am in New Westminster, as well as in the house where I am. They're still very, very supportive, and I found a couple of key individuals within that community and within the house that I can really depend on and that I can go to with regard to my problem. Whereas it's almost exactly like being back at home in my own community, where I knew I could go to my mom or my dad or one of my brothers or sisters with regard to the issues I was having, and have them assist me in, you know, finding a solution.
So that's one of my questions here is, you know, coming from a band or a government that financed your treatment, right? Generally speaking, you know, in my experience of working with funders and whatnot, especially First Nations, it's usually only First Nation specific treatment. So how did the last door come into play in that?
It was personal. It was one of 4 institutions that was offered to me to attend to, and looking at me and my personal choices with regard to my growing up and development years from 0 to 5, I figured I'd learned enough. I knew enough about culture. After Mom and Dad sobered up, we got more into our native culture, and they guided us with regard to where we wanted to go and allowed us to develop where we wanted to be. So when I made the decision to go to a treatment center, I decided that I wanted to go to a place that was going to address my issues with regard to alcohol and drugs, and with minimum focus on the cultural aspect of it, because I think if I needed that, I have family in Vancouver, as well. My parents and the rest of my family can come down here, and we can do that kind of stuff.
So knowing your state of mind and being at the time where you're looking for treatment options, like they listened to you in that request and followed through with that.
Initially, I was fortunate enough to have the support and the leadership of my mother's community. I'll try to get into where I am, and it is primarily looking at the needs of the individuals. At the end of the day, if you can present a strong enough argument for it,
right?
And I think largely looking at the resolve that I have with regard to culture coming secondary, not being a major primary concern of mine, because of the need to address the alcohol and the drug issue that I was putting my family through hardship.
As you know, speaking from your own specific experience of First Nation, I guess a lot of the idea behind First Nation specific treatment and focusing on culture is due to the lack thereof of an individual growing up in the culture, in the ceremony, and you know that they sort of bring that back into the healing approach, which makes complete sense. But would you recommend a non-First Nations treatment to someone who didn't have the culture?
I think realistically, when you stop and take a look at it, culture exists in many forms with regard to how you brought up. When I look at the requirement to address the issue, culture can be incorporated, but it shouldn't. I don't think it should be a primary focus for a First Nations person because of the differences in cultural beliefs, customs, and traditions that you grow up in. Because you have, in my region, we have Carrier, Chilcotin, and Shuswap. And all three of them have different culture, customs, and traditions that they go according to. And some of the, like even the language barrier between our northern Shuswap and the Okanagan Shuswap. In that, you get five to 10 different dialects just in our region.
Yeah.
So.
It's an interesting approach because, like you said, the affliction that an individual is dealing with, from whatever past experiences or, an addiction and all of that's coming into play, like how much can any one ceremony bring about a complete change? That individual, is almost like they need to be taught sort of like unceremonious, methods to just deal with the changes in their life, the changing of the habits, and then once they're sort of responsible again to bring back, and I'm not talking First Nation specific, I'm talking anybody that has, deep beliefs in
Well, definitely. When you stop and take a look at my issues were, say, when I came into treatment center, I had the problems with regard to grief loss that I hadn't dealt with in over probably 18 years since my great-grandmother passed away. And then we have going right up until my Aunt Doreen passed away over a period of 18 years, not being able to address those issues with regard to anything as well as the underlying other mental health issues that were sitting there. Never thinking that they were contributing factors, always keeping them separate. Finally, at the end of the day, all of it just came to a head when we were sitting in Prince George after one of my last hurrahs up there. My sister just told me, "How do we do this for you?" And told her just to get a hold of Mom's family, because at the end of the day, for me to get the help I needed the direction to come from Mom's family, because those were the people that provided care for me, and those were the people that would understand, or would take the time to understand I knew what I needed at the end of the day.
Wow, so much faith in something outside of ourselves is the story there, eh? So they must be pretty happy that you're coming home.
They are. They're very happy. My mom and dad can't. Like mom's on the couch, and she's wondering, hurry up, how much longer? And my aunt is talking about planning a dinner for me when I go back to my mom and dad's place.
Oh, so great.
My first day.
I'm so glad to hear that you guys are going to be able to connect, and even though like your plan is to move back down here, like everybody's just going to be so at peace. Knowing that like you are who you are now, and.
Well, definitely, and I mean, but just creating the guidelines with regard to the way the program has been structured that I attended, receiving what they call gifts of recovery, mending relationships and that sort of stuff. One of the bigger factors with me was not being able to discuss with my cousin for issues for the past 3 years since her mother passed away, because that was one of our things. We could depend on each other wholeheartedly, but in the last probably 3 years, it just slowly teetered away. But with her focusing her grief loss, and me just down spiraling into my addiction in order to address that for myself.
Well, is a wonderful story to be a part of and listen to here. Thanks so much for coming in, Isadore, and sharing this. So much hope out there, for yourself and your family, and all the best. So we got to get out of the studio. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Thanks for listening. This is U2. I still haven't found what I'm looking for.